That would not be good.
Yeah.
Uh,
That is,
Is there a way that you can tell when it's back on, Jimmy?
yeah.
Okay.
So I think it's reconnecting now.
Okay. Let us know when it connects back on, if it connects back on. Because I do not know, I do not remember where we were. I know Kendall was talking, but when I started getting those text messages,
Okay.
my
So we're back. Sorry about that. For some
all right,
reason.
folks. It looks like folks we dropped off for a couple of minutes. There was a technical difficulty. We apologize about that, but we are now back on, and we actually had Mr. Justin and Mr. Kendall talking about the things that they have seen that may dissuade folks, and especially within their demographic in particular, because again, we're focusing on millennials, and millennials are somewhere between their mid 20s and upper 30s right now. And so, Justin, we may have missed a large part of this of our
Oh, well,
audience.
that's
May have
it.
missed a large. So I'm gonna have you to kind of
Yeah.
summarize
So we
what
need
you were
to
saying about,
go back and
and then we're gonna have
summarize it.
Kendall, you do the same thing, just to make sure that everybody got what you said. So go ahead, Justin, and then we'll follow up with you, Kendall.
Yeah, so I think basically my main point was that people, as they've gone through their, say for instance, they've gone through their career, that's the first thing they do. Say they get out of school, they're doing their career, they fill that gap with, as far as finding a spouse and taking the time to do that, they fill in that gap with all these other things. And when you fill in that gap, it's you get used to a routine, and it's just like anything else. You don't take something out and put it back in, or sub something in for it. And so by the time they look up, they're late 30s, early 40s, and
Right.
they still have not decided, oh well, this was more important at the time, and this was more important at the time. And so now, that's I think that's why there's such a high percentage of people not being married earlier on.
What about you, Kendall? What do you say?
yeah, and I think, and just to follow up on Justin's great point, like the two things that I was thinking of is just that I think in prime, naturally you can get married at just about any age, right? In a lot of states, like after you're, 17, 18, up until, whenever you can get married, but prime marrying ages are kind of, in your 20s, maybe in your early 30s. And I was just saying that unfortunately we still have a lot of black men at those ages that are in prison and, not necessarily functioning members of society the way that we would like them, to be. And so it kind of, it takes them out of the running for, being able to start these families at a young age and being able to kind of build on, the successes that they might have had in high school and things like that. So naturally there's, different stories for different parts of the country and things like that. But I think that that's an overarching theme. And then I think as well, kind of to piggyback off Justin's point, I just think the general American construct of like what a successful, family is and what a, successful person in a community is, like that's changed over the last couple of generations. Like you don't no longer, is it, you know, necessary for you to have to be married and have children and have the same job for 40 years and white picket fence to be a successful American. And so that view of what a successful American looks different. And for some people, that's not being married. For some people, that's traveling. For some people, that's, doing other things that don't necessarily include being married. So for better or for worse, I think that that kind of plays into the numbers that you mentioned before as well.
Okay. Hey,
Yeah.
I'm gonna get a question in about the fear of responsibility. So there's some when I talk to some guys, one of the things that come up is, there's a lot of responsibility that comes with marriage and having a family and kids, and you can't just quit your job and go, tour, Europe like you may want to, or just be a bum. When you have people that are dependent on you and that you're responsible for, should should this be a concern? Was there ever a time when you thought, man, I may be biting off a lot here by assuming the role of head of household and having a family that comes with a lot of responsibility? Did you ever think that maybe you wasn't ready for it? Was there ever a point that you doubted if you were ready or not?
If it's cool with Justin, I'll go first on this one. I'll put it like this. And to the point as far as my timeline, just to give y'all some context, like again, I'm about to get married. So I'm not married yet. But I had my son, I was 23 years old. So to your point, Uncle Mark, I was not married to the woman that I had my son with. We were not together. I was scared shitless. So as
Okay.
far as you know what I'm saying? So like
Hmm.
as far as them saying like should you be worried or should you be apprehensive? Like there are things that you should have set in your mind before that happens. I did those things out of order. And so because of that, I was playing defense. And so I think it would any rational person, yeah, I was a bit apprehensive and I was a bit worried, but I think it was one of those things that to your or to Justin's point, to your point, Uncle Marcus, like it made me jump on it quicker. It was like I was in grad school at the time, and I would have loved to have like finished my master's and things like that. But I was like, man, I got to get a job. Like I have to enter the workforce. I need to start working and making money so that I can provide for my son. And so, you know, my timeline of things that I wanted to do got sped up, but that was because of the decisions that I made. So it's like it's time to step up to the plate and do those things. So I think you can be apprehensive. I think you can have concerns. I think those are logical things that you should explore. But you know, if you're kind of doing it in the right order, those are things that you're talking to your partner about, and then you're kind of making that decision together. When that timeline is kind of sped up for you and you are not able to dictate the shots, that's when even more unsettling thoughts are going to kind of creep in. So, you know, the responsibility's there. That's not going away. Yeah,
absolutely. So I even had some very similar situation where my oldest daughter, she's 11, so we were going to be 10. So we 10 years in marriage here coming up. So she was here before we actually got married. Now I had already made the decision I was going to propose to her even before knowing that she was pregnant. Now we just didn't get married till later because it just took time. Right. But the still the same concerns was there, right? So where I remember when we went to the hospital, had my oldest daughter, and we got in the car, and I was like, "Really? They gonna let us just leave?" And it was one of those moments where I remember specifically, and we looked at each other like, "Ain't nobody gonna come to the house with us? Like they gonna really?"
It's your turn now. Yes.
Right. So, but that was a eye-opening moment for me. And that feeling and knowing, like you talk about, like the question asked about the weight, the responsibility. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but as a human, we are adaptable people.
Yes.
So I can sit here and say, well, I can't do this and I can't do that. But I tell you one thing, if I'm faced with it, I'm pretty sure I'm going to figure something out.
So it's kind of like those, okay, what am I going to do now type of moments.
Right. Absolutely. Right.
And you figure it out eventually.
And for those that are out there who are listening, guys, if you're concerned about shouldering this much weight, let me say this. I promise you the responsibility of leading a family, being responsible for children and a household makes you a better person. Absolutely. You will be 10 times a better man than you ever would be if you hadn't taken on these challenges, because you don't know what you're fully capable of. Like Justin was just saying, you're coming from the hospital with a child now. You're like, okay, what do I do next? Where's the instruction manual? Well, there isn't. You have to learn some things quickly now, get up to speed on. But it makes you a better person because you have to draw on everything that's good about you to make this happen now.
Yeah, absolutely. And you realize that you start, especially in that particular instance, whether it be having a child or even, like I said, taking the plunge, getting married, you got to realize that you're going to start giving yourself. Like this is the most you're going to start giving of yourself than you've ever done, because everything else before then, typically you've been a selfish person because you've been doing it for yourself. You've been figuring out how to, where I'm going to school, am I going to get up and study? All these things was for you. Now you have to think of somebody else.
Well, I can say this, gentlemen, that I know my nephew personally. He's a great guy. He was great growing up. His only flaw, according to his mother, is that his heart is too big. That he's too generous, he's too kind. But my nephew has been like the perfect young man coming up. I wish I can clone him. You too, Justin. I wish I can clone both of y'all, and we could mass produce. Because one of the complaints that you hear from women is you just can't find good men, and I understand that it is a challenge. It is hard, So for guys like you who are doing the right thing, your wives are better because they have a good man in their life, and you're better for taking on the responsibility of having a family, and so you both are lottery winners. I just wish there were more to go around. I mean, I hate that there are women out there, good women, attractive, intelligent, talented, who would never ever have a Kendall or a Justin in their life, and will go through life single, and will never have the pleasure of knowing what that's like.
Let me ask you
You know,
this, because we want to kind of manage what time we do have. We're, I guess, stepping into the second half of our show right now. We want to kind of talk about some of the things that, folks probably want to know, whether they're listening now or listening in the future. And one of the things that, we do see that there seems to be no lack of data and statistics about young men who are not like yourself. And when I say that, yeah, they may be having children, but they're not, as Jimmy said, stepping up and taking responsibility for bringing children or life onto this earth, and taking responsibility to be a father, or as it pertains to being married and starting a family. What I understand, probably at the foundation of this is family. I think both of you are in a very solid position of having strong families, but I know that you probably do have colleagues, friends, folks that you work with, hang out with, who just look, man, I had it hard, I had it rough, I didn't have everything that you guys had, and it's just been tough out here. What advice do you give, in spite of those who might be having a hard time, who might be struggling, who may have had a child or children and are struggling trying to make the types of decisions that you guys have made?
So yeah, I have a couple friends that that I know either didn't grow up with a father, that have a skewed view on what they think that marriage is. May not even have a faith-based, so a lot of things that we're talking about, faith-based, family, and so if you take that and you strip that away, you're like, okay, well, if I'm having this conversation with a person who doesn't believe or have an idea of what that looks like, I always still go back to, okay, what are the things that you are doing, right? I mean, it's not like you're in your house not doing anything. So everything that you do, if it could be somebody who wants to make money, who's just a workaholic. Okay, you're a workaholic. So it takes time to do that. Like, you have to put effort into it, like giving them examples of, it's not something that just happens. You want to get something to eat, you have to go to work, make some money, or you got to cook it yourself. Whatever the case may be, you have to do something to get a result. Right. And if you think that, and that's anything, every relationship that you have to put effort in. So it's not even just about marriage. If it can be your friend, like if you wouldn't have friends if you just talk bad about them all the time and you didn't show up on, and do anything, right? I mean, you have to put effort into these things. If you like doing certain things, if you like golfing, you got to put time into golfing to get better. Are you going to be terrible, right? It's like, you have to put work. Everything that you want, or everything that's good for you. I don't want to say good, but anything that you want, that you want in your life,
yes,
it's worth having. You need to put effort into it.
That
so you can't look at marriage as saying, okay, I'm not going to put work into that because of whatever reason, because you're putting work into other things.
Kendall, what do you think?
I think that's a great point. And I think I've had a couple of these situations to where, like, maybe, my friends, they didn't have a father figure in their life, or maybe it was a mother, and like their mother was not there for them, and they grew up with their father. So that maybe they didn't have a parent. And then now they're starting to see maybe some of the remnants of those consequences seep into their relationships, be it with the remaining parent that they have, or be it with, a girlfriend that they're with, or whatever the case may be. And I think it's just one of those things to where, if you can, and sometimes it's very tough to do, but I think if you can make the correlation as to maybe what in your history is maybe causing you to want to step out on your woman, or maybe causing you to not want to, to dedicate yourself to her the way that you really should and things like that. Like if you can kind of make that correlation as to why you're doing that, I think it's a bit easier to then like after you've identified it, you can then like make steps to change it. So it's like if you see your relationship is kind of going down the crapper and you're like, man, why is this happening? And it's because you're cheating on your girlfriend. It's like, well, why am I doing that? And then you kind of look back at your, you know, your parents' relationship maybe, and maybe your dad was doing that to your mom or something like that. Maybe it's not always that black and white, but a lot of times we do things kind of based on the experiences that we had growing up and kind of what we saw firsthand on a day-to-day basis. So again, I think making that correlation, and then I think as well, just being like, if you want there to be change in your relationship, to Justin's point, it's like perpetuate that change. Like you have to create steps or make, you know, have a plan of attack for how you want to, attack the way that your relationship is kind of faltering and how you can then make that better. And then like, it's also a relationship and it's a partnership. So if you think you're just going to change it by yourself, that's probably not the way to go either. Like you probably need some help from your significant other, talk through some things so they can understand where you're coming from. And then you can kind of voice those opinions together. So I do think that like, the relationship with people's parents or maybe just relationships that they've had in their families, like that stuff does seep into the relationships that you have. It's not always so easy to see or make that correlation, but I think once you do that, it makes it a bit easier to then plan what you're going to do to fix it.
Okay.
And let me add a layer to that, because kind of as a follow-on to that, you said something a little bit earlier, Kendall, that I thought was kind of interesting but very apropos. You said that, you know, a lot of folks just don't see the correlation between needing or even wanting to be married and to be what they consider to be successful in life. And I thought that was a very interesting statement. And I kind of see a lot of it because unlike some of our grandparents, great grandparents, et cetera, where they literally needed each other for financial survival, their social status depended on them being married. And there were real life implications that impacted them economically, socially, etc., in terms of being married or not being married. And now that's not particularly the case. And so it brings up a very interesting social statement about the future of marriage. And we get back to the topic, is marriage dead? Because, you know, men or women for that matter don't typically have to have that spouse in order to have enough money to, one, get a house, two, raise a child or children for that matter. And so it brings up a very interesting conversation in terms of what does the future of marriage look like? And especially when we look at millennials, Gen Z, we have what we call the gig economy. Everybody just kind of moves from spot to spot to spot to spot.
Well, Tom, let me add to that because it's important that we bring this up. We've talked about this before, and so one of the pieces of advice that I always give for women, that you can always judge whether you're with the right person or not if that person willing to lay their life down for you. They love you enough to protect you and your children and his family, willing to die for that. And that's a guy that you can at least have a chance to build something with. And I already know the answer. I'm going to ask you guys because I think it needs to be said. But I already know the answer. I know both of you guys would give your life to protect your families. But can you both speak to that as to, you know, where you are now with that, making that kind of sacrifice for others versus where you were before you decided to get married or start a family?
And understand those were two completely different questions.
Yes.
So make sure we address them both.
All right. All right. So I'll address the first one that Brother Duncan had mentioned as far as the need for a family, right? Because of the fact that now it's not about like my dad was part of what was one of 10 kids, right? And that's because they lived on a farm and they needed those bodies, right? and nowadays it's not in that same form, in that same form. However, I don't believe that marriage is dead because we still need relationships.
Yes, we do.
So I know we look at relationships different now. I know that that has evolved, but it doesn't negate the fact that we still need that connection with other human beings. It's kind of going back to church, where, you know, many parts to one body, right? We need each other. So the finger can't say that I'm more important than the right arm, whatever, right? It's just like, I need you to function. We need all of us to function. So that's to that point. And
if you want me to get the second point, yeah,
sure,
to Uncle Mark. So Uncle Mark, like you were talking about with laying down your life for somebody and like how that's changed. So like that distinction, I'll just use like my experience with chastity. Like, when I first realized that I love chastity, like I was still in college. Like, so we're talking 2011, something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like at that time, if someone was like, "Man, would you die for chastity?" I'd be like, "Yeah." Like, if whatever she need, like if I would do anything for her. At that point, like, was I thinking about her father? Was I thinking about her grandfather? Was I thinking about her mother or uncles or nobody like that? Like, no, it was very singular to this person that I knew, and I just loved her completely. Like now, I'm thinking about all the tentacles that her family reaches. I'm thinking about the people at her center. I'm thinking about what I lay my life down for her father, for her daughter that is now my daughter. Like
right.
All of those things are now, that's a part of it now. And like, in selfishly, again, when we first met and when I first realized that I was in love with her, I was only thinking about her. I wasn't, the rest of her family was not necessarily in my realm of comprehension. I hadn't necessarily met them. It was completely different. Now that's like my family too. So to your question, it's like that branch has evolved quite a bit because now they're a part of my family. And so it all means the same thing. So I think that you start to, and I think that kind of rolls into a bigger point that it's just like, once you're really in love with somebody, like, and to Justin made this point beautifully earlier, it's just like the unselfishness that you have to kind of conduct yourself with is alarming. Like, cause you don't have any comprehension for it before you're in love with this person or before you kind of go through these wars. And like, I'm not even married yet. And I can kind of see this. So, from Justin's point, like, he's got 10 years in already. So I know that there's some other things that I'm going to learn along the way. But I just think the level of love that I have, like for chastity and for a family, like it has evolved substantially since we first met, and we're not even married yet. So
that's why I say that it makes you a better person. That the overall experience makes you a better person, makes you a better man.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Agreed.
So as we kind of move into the last quarter of our show, if we look at where we are now and we look 10, 20 years, unfortunately, Jimmy, the statistics, I mean, we talked about this before integration, before segregation was legally struck down. Black men and women were more likely to be married than any other demographic in the United States. Now that has changed, and the Black community, or Black men and women, are least likely to be married among all demographic. And that has been slowly declining since the 70s. Now, we see, if we look at marriage rates, African Americans, 30% of African Americans are married, 43% of Latin Americans, 52% Caucasian, and 58% Asian American. If we look at never married, 50% African Americans never married, 43% of Hispanics never married, 28% white, and then Asian Americans, 31% never married. This came from the Bureau of Labor, U.S. Census Bureau.
Yes.
I'm sorry. And so, you can say there's some flaw, maybe with some of the numbers to a certain degree, but I don't know if it's going to be that flawed. So if we look at, the silence, they've already made their imprint. Jimmy and I, we are in Gen X. We've kind of made our imprint. Then we have the millennials. That's your generation, and you guys are the kind of the up and comings. And then we have Gen Z. We see the statistics. They still seem to be moving in that direction. Now, the interesting news is that typically what we see happen in our community starts bleeding into other communities. When we look at, for instance, the divorce rates that started declining in the Black community, it typically happened in mainstream America. If we look at a lot of other demographics, Malcolm used to say, if you want to know what's going to happen, if you want to know what's going to happen uptown, you got to look downtown. Downtown is where the Black folks were. Uptown is where mainstream America was. So, I mean, we look at this, so goes Black America, so eventually goes America. Mm-hmm. What do you say as young men in terms of changing these statistics? I'm not saying that y'all are in a position to change these statistics, but if we look at what's making these numbers decline, and we look at what is it that we do to either, one, reimagine or reevaluate what family looks like so we can build stronger communities. Because where Jimmy and I are focusing on right now is strengthening the Black community, and the nuclear element of the Black community
Right.
is the Black family. And Black men in particular, Black men speak, we take initiative in terms of protecting and leading and providing for our families. But if we look at things, let's have some real talk here. The mass incarceration of Black men, that takes a lot of Black men out of the equation. If we look at same-sex relationships, whether those are gay men, whether those are men who are trans, and it is a
growing problem, Tom. Well,
it's
say problem. It's a growing lifestyle that impacts traditional.
I can say this, and this is not a statement against any specific demographic, but when we look at the number of young men who aren't, in my opinion, even old enough to be thinking about relationships and marriage and sex, who are saying that they think they like men more than they like men. Well, how do you even know that? You're 10 years old. Or if we look at the transgender community, and because these statistics impact us significantly, in a lot of cases more than other communities, that takes a lot of Black men out of the equation at light numbers now, but growing numbers. And the question is, this is real talk that we have to figure out. We have got to continue to build a strong Black community. In order to do that, we have to build strong Black families. You guys can see the future. You have fresh eyes. You guys are seeing what's coming up that I was looking at going to these schools and like, really? What do you guys see, and where do you see us marching in order to strengthen our families, in order to strengthen our communities?
Man, all right. So
I apologize for that question.
That's a pretty lengthy one, but it's a very, very good question. And I want to approach it like this. Because of, and we've talked about it earlier as far as faith-based, right? So everything to me is about love. I've been talking with a good friend of mine, and we've been talking about this word love. God is love. God doesn't look at us whether we're straight, gay. It's love, right? And so we got to start there, because without love, we can't even have a conversation, right? If you want to try to bring someone, you say whether it be back into the fold or trying to get them to see a different way, if you can't reach them in any kind of way, it needs to start with love. And when I say that, there's instances where I think the mindset of people think that because, like to Brother Duncan's point, where you're saying, how do you know if you're gay or not, right? Well, a lot of times I feel like it's because of what people have experienced. Just like we all experience something and we associate certain things. So maybe I like to do certain things because I've seen that. So maybe that's what's encouraging the fact that I feel that I'm different than what people saying that I am, right? But you can have that conversation, and just because someone, say for instance, feels that way, doesn't mean we need to shun them or close the door. We have to be able to bring a conversation to them and say, okay, if you want to, if this is going to be a lifestyle that you're gonna take, why? Okay, and this goes to another point where Kendall brought up earlier, where you talk about having conversations, and that's, we need to really, as a Black community, engage ourselves in therapy.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, okay.
So
and Jimmy,
we do have some
two
comments
things
on the chat line, so don't.
Yes, I did have someone to text to ask if, because I can't see anything, and I think I may have been cut off when the stream got cut off. So Jimmy, if you could monitor what we have on the chat line and maybe share those, because we may have some questions for our guests, and just to make sure we don't take this out of context. This really isn't isolating any particular community. The conversation is more so for those sisters out there who are looking, Black women out there who are looking for Black men who want to get married to a black woman. And we looked at those numbers and we kind of take, okay, give or take, there are a few more black boys who are born than black girls, and then over a period of time there are things that happen, so to speak. And so when you look at adult age marriage age conversations that you're having, and we look at factors like mass incarceration of black men, conversation we've been having since the 80s, we look at the number of black men who are not interested in black women, or those who feel that they are genetically not male anymore. Those types of conversations in terms of having to reimagine and reevaluate where is the black community going as a result of the black family. And that has to do with a man and a woman getting together, making a decision to build a family. That's kind of the context of it. So I just want to make sure we got that. And Jimmy, let's make sure that if we
Jones's comment in, she made a couple of comments, but the last one I think is probably most relevant, where she talks about the media. So when we've talked about this before, we just don't see strong black families, strong men.
Oh, we didn't. Jimmy, you froze for a second. So can you repeat the question? You froze for a second.
Okay, I don't know.
Repeat the question from Ms. Jones.
Yes, it was pertaining to the media and not represent us in a positive fashion. So that happens. That's a big issue, and it's something that, for those who have some control over the content, we have to do a better job at shaping our content in a positive message. You know, we've done the thug thing and the gangster thing. We've gotten as much mileage out of that as we can get. So now it's time to change direction and start showing black men in a more positive light.
Well, but that presupposes, Jimmy, that we're controlling the image and we're controlling the narrative about black men, about black women, about the black family.
Well, Tom, we're starting to see a few more production companies starting up. We're starting to see more black people shaping content, developing movies. I try to support black filmmakers as much as possible. I don't care if the movie, the quality is good or bad. Just the fact that you made a movie to try to tell our story is what's important. And more, we have to, like I say, get away from the gangster thug thing. That's not us. They've made that us. That's been imposed on us, but it's not truly who we are. You know, we are communal people. We are family people. We are strong men, warriors. We have to get back to those positive messages for young black boys growing up.
And I think that also, to a conversation we were having earlier during the show, is what we are accepting. Because, I mean, we haven't gotten a lot of mileage out of that, but there are other folks who I believe want to control the direction of our communities who have gotten a lot of mileage out of that narrative, out of those images, in order to maintain and control what's going on in our community. And so that is what we have to have conversations within our own institutions, our own families, about what we are going to accept and buy into and what we're not going to accept and buy into.
Right.
Absolutely. And that's that, you know, when you're at home, I know when we're in our families, we need to be bringing up our kids, not listening to that music, right?
Correct.
And trying to redirect them on another path of, okay, one, it's kind of catch-22, because like you want to support black people, right? But in certain things, we can't support certain things, right? Because it's perpetuating something that we don't want to extend, right?
So, and I'll bring this up, and I talk to a lot of people about this. Unfortunately, multi-billion-dollar corporate conglomerates have no problem paying massive amounts of money and millions of dollars in order to propagate the image of minstrelsy within black men, otherwise soft, effeminate men who cannot make any decisions and who are dependent on someone else, usually a woman, for everything. And they have no problem with elevating black women and paying them massive amounts of money. I will leave these names nameless in order to create an image of black women who are not anything similar to what our mothers and our foremothers were like, and as a result have created an image of black womanhood that at a minimum should be rejected and reshamed, in terms of teaching young girls who are dancing to milkshakes and all this other kind of stuff. And I'm not going to even get into what all that stuff means, but again, this is something that we are buying into and not having the same protests, not having the same fights that we do when we're protesting against young brothers being shot in the streets. I would suggest that those images and those narratives of black men and black women are more destructive than some of the other images that we see that we protest in the streets about, because they are very subliminal, but they are very effective. And I think what we are seeing is a byproduct and a result of what we see through mass media and entertainment when we.
Well, I'm going to say, Tom, but that's why it's important. The content is important. But on top of that, Justin and Kendra, you guys are ambassadors. I mean, when young guys see you guys, like for instance, Kendra, your father's been a big influence on me. It's been an inspiration to give me hope and courage. I look at how long they've been married and been successful at it, and I feel encouraged that I can do the same. So, you guys never know who you're influencing and who people are looking up to you for the success that you're having. So, I encourage you guys to continue to do what you're doing, to be out there. Don't be ashamed. Don't have to hide what you're doing. Being a father, a great husband, a great friend, and being responsible is all good things. Those are not square things or nerdy things. I mean, those are hero attributes. So, I want you guys, your light to continue to shine so others can see it, and hopefully others will be influenced by what you're doing and say, hey, Justin did it or Kendall did it, so obviously I can do it. So it can be done. So I don't just have to be afraid to go into this, even though there are some elements of it that are frightening, but you can overcome your fear because those guys did it. So, hey, Tom, we are at the top of the hour, so we need to go ahead and wrap up.
Let's kind of get our takeaways from Mr. Balrod and Mr. Zachary. The topic of the show is
marriage dead?
Marriage dead. Give me your summary and your takeaways from that, and then we'll go ahead and close out the show.
I'll go first. I don't think that is dead, right? And I think to the points that we were kind of all making today, I just think that life is a lot different in 2021 than it was 20, 40, 60 years ago. And so I think as society evolves, marriage will continue to evolve as well. But I think at the end of the day, like the point that Justin made is the most poignant. It's like people need people. Like we need relationships. We have to be there for one another. And marriage is one of the oldest institutions that I think does a lot more good than it does harm. And so some people may choose not to engage in marriage, and that doesn't mean that they can't be successful members of the community. But I don't think that is dead. I think that it's a beautiful institution. I can't wait to get married next year. Get some advice from Mr. Badas on what I need to be doing. Oh yeah, you will be there, Uncle Mark. But yeah, I don't think that it's dead. I think it's changing. I still think that it's beautiful, and I think it represents, what we kind of should aspire to, is having a partner that will be there for you, through thick and thin.
It is evolving, and let me be very clear. I read an article over a year ago about people in Asia getting married to their cell phones. So marriage is definitely evolving, but that's another show.
We're not married cell phones on
that's
Black
another show.
What were those vows like?
Go ahead, Justin. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. No, definitely. I mean, I don't believe marriage is dead. I think that marriage in itself, in that union, is a very special relationship. And there's only you have relationship with people, and you have those special intimate moments with, multiple people in your lives, throughout your lives. And this is just one of the other ones, right? I mean, most people have a best friend, right? Most people have a relationship with their parents. Most people have a relationship with their brothers and sisters. All of these are relationships that we need. And I don't look at marriage as being anything different than those relationships. And Brother Stewart, you mentioned something that really right at the end that kind of gave me a different perspective. Like me personally, on like social media, I used to be on it kind of, but I stopped putting stuff on there because it made it. I be honest with you, I didn't want people to think that everything was perfect, right? Because everything people put on there is like, oh, my life is perfect, and so it got to a point where I was like, you know what? Why am I putting things out there, right? And then I didn't put anything about my family and stuff like that because I wanted to keep that to me. But you made a good point that we need to let our light shine, right? We need to let what we experiencing with our families, the love, the interactions that we have, for people to see that it does exist, because everything else, because they're putting all the other stuff out there,
That's
right?
correct.
They're putting all the other bad stuff out there. And you made a good point that I never really got over it, because I was like, you know what, I don't want to post something and it be looked at it like, oh, well, he's everything's perfect with it, and it's not, but at the same time, if we don't let our light shine, then that shine will dim.
That's true. That is true.
All right. Well, hey, guys, that is absolutely great show. I appreciate you both. An
Thank
excellent
you
job.
so much to both of you guys.
And I'm sure that a lot of our folks who are listening live now and those who will be listening afterwards will benefit a great deal. And we hope to definitely have both of you on our show at some time in the future. In 2022, we blink and we'll be in another year. So we appreciate what you guys have contributed to our community today. Jimmy, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Yes, we will have Coach T, Kendall's brother, next month as one of our special guests for our first Wednesday show. And I just want to say thank you to both of you guys. You guys are great leaders. You're inspiring. Like I said, if there was a way that we could put you in that machine and clone you guys and mass produce you, just so other women could be out there, could have the benefit of having a great guy in their life. I mean, I would do it in a heartbeat. But since we can't do that, then we can at least get you guys, hopefully, to inspire some others, young guys coming up, to let them know that this is not something you need to fear. This is something that's going to make you a better person in the end. So you just need to find the right person and do the right thing by them. So thank you to you guys. And Tom always closes out with a prayer. So I'm gonna give Tom the last word in the prayer.
All right. In that case, everybody, if you could bow your heads, dear Lord and gracious Father, we come before you this evening, thanking you for bringing us together in brotherhood. Father, we thank you for bringing Brother Justin and Brother Kendall here today to share their insights. Father, we ask that you would bless them, bless their families, bless their future, bless their children, bless their generations upon generations upon generations, Father. We thank you, Father, for continuing to gird up and strengthen our community as we continue to deal with the hurdles and the crises of life, Father, that we all have, but understanding that as we go through each crisis, we do build character, Father. And we know that there is nothing that we can not do with you by our side and holding our hands, Father. So we ask that you would continue to strengthen us. We ask that you would continue to bore within each of us insights that our listeners need to hear, Father. And especially during this holiday, we ask, Father, that you bless our families out there. We understand that there are a lot of folks who do not have families, who do not have anyone to lean on, folks who are homeless, folks who are hungry, folks who need our help. So we ask, Father, that you inspire within each of us and with all of our listeners, fathers, and within our community, the compassion to go out and help those who are in need, Father, whatever capacity that is. Give them strength, give them courage, give them understanding, Father. And we just thank you for each day that you have given us life. And in your precious name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Appreciate it. Well, I appreciate the invite. It was nice to meet you, Brother Stewart and Kendall, and I'm pretty sure I'll see you, Brother Duncan, here down the line.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Mr. Duncan, thank you so much, and Uncle Mark, yeah, I'll definitely be seeing you soon, my man. For sure.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
have a good evening.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, it's incumbent upon us, Jimmy, that we continue to bring these brothers together and connect them all. And there's some brothers out there just like them who are, not married yet, and who